Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 83. And this episode is a continuation from episode 82, wherein my guest was Louisa Barnum. And we discussed her project and program called Magenta FM. And in this second part, we branch off more into a dialogue and we discuss philosophy and meaning and sense and purpose and all these things that are associated with philosophy. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. It was a pleasure having her. It was great getting some insights from her in this second part. So I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And thank you very much for watching. And thank you to those of you who are subscribed to the channel. I appreciate it.
So how does all that land with you?
Well, I wanted maybe give a disclaimer to the audience that you and I talked about maybe we would cover Magenta and the work that you and Rachel are doing. So I'm so glad you brought up the logos, because now we can maybe go into a dialogue. So I'll offer a few thoughts, again, just to feed what we're doing here. And so in responding to your discussion about the reciprocal nature of being in communion with the higher self, I would bring a couple of ideas on board that are very complementary, in at least my perspective. That is, firstly, I'll start with the will, since we've been talking about wills, and this will be a capital W will, like a Schopenhauerian will. And as he describes it, there is the will. So he gets kind of Advaita Vedanta on us, and he talks about the will, and this is probably the primacy of intelligibility or consciousness, or as you say, cognition. Again, I was interviewing the cognitive light cone biologist, and he thinks it's intelligence all the way down. It's scale invariant, but it's just intelligence. And so, but intelligence requires intelligibility and interpretation, etc. So the will, according to Schopenhauer, we could substitute with the Brahman or something like that, in Advaita Vedanta, sort of the absolute singularity of I don't want to call it consciousness, but we'll call it cognition here, because I like that word that you're using. And there's also the representation, which is the seeming inverse side of it, which is you and I having a conversation right now. These seeming Markov blankets, independent agents who are seemingly autonomous, seemingly of their own will, be it a limited kind of will. And so I'll bring Jung in for a second again, and he worked with the idea of the daimon. And so when you talk about the higher self, I think about the daimon, I interviewed a guy named Bernardo Kastrup several times, and he's a Jungian. He's also an idealist, so he likes that. He loves Schopenhauer, so he fits well with this. So to drive to a point, that the daimon is the greater will seeking to express itself through yourself or myself or any of the other 8 billion souls on this planet. And to me, that is another way of looking at the higher self, that the daimon has a will. It has not an agenda, but it has perhaps a lure, like an eros, like if we're going to bring in sort of Greek thinking, just it is a lure, a draw, and it's trying to express itself through us. And so I think that could be part of the language of the higher self, that it is at once universal and at once unique. And as we are ensouled and we are expressing ourselves as these, as some would say, little eddies in the stream that just swirl up and then disappear, but they're never different other than the stream. They are just the stream eddying up, and there's this little whirlpool that exists temporarily or ephemerally. And that relationship between having the daimon work through you, or having your higher self in concert with you, working in conjunction with you as you do your shadow work, as you clear away the obstacles and the appendages, which is some of what Buddhism talks about. It's coming into the no self so that you can have the eightfold path of the right relations, right speech, right business, right whatever it is. And so I'll stop there and see how that fits for what you're thinking about. But that to me is just another way of saying what you said. I think that we can maybe illustrate what this is that we can enter into relationship with.
Yeah, what you're speaking to is tricky, because in order to engage in this dialogue, you kind of have to have a spiritual worldview. And you know, you can entertain 7 different worldviews before breakfast, as Owen Barfield, you know, famously said. But you know, incidentally, and this is kind of not answering your question at all, but it'll be a very brief tangent, I promise. I do believe that true healing can really only come about if you do have a spiritual worldview. Because what is called into question when you talk about daemons, I'm not quite sure how you say that word, daemon or daimon?
Daimon is what it's Daemon, but it's typically said daimon. Yeah. And there's a spectrum of interpretation of what a daimon is. Right. And I was kind of invoking the Jungian, which is essentially a will that wants to operate through you. It is intelligence wanting to move through you, but it is goal directed. It is seeking to express itself. So if Da Vinci had followed his daimon, he did what he did. Had he not followed his daimon, he would have gone mad, perhaps, and not ever created anything. So that's a good example of that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe they are the same thing. You know, the higher self or the I am is another way to put it, or the daemon. But I don't really see the spiritual worlds as a singularity. That's not how I understand it.
Okay.
I see it much more as an aspect. I see it as we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. We are beings. We're not disappearing into a singularity when we no longer have a physical body. And I think if you were to be able to see into the spiritual worlds, whatever that means and whatever that is like, what you're seeing are beings, not a world like this. It's a different thing. So there are many beings, just as there are many humans here. So I don't really find that the concept of singularity is supporting of certainly my worldview, because when I think about the healing trajectory, I'm thinking about biography. And I have anecdotal stories of people who are born into this world, have all these experiences, have really difficult experiences, for instance, and then find their way to a career path which cannot be explained by just looking at this life. They have capacities and strengths and gifts that cannot be explained by just having one life. And I have come to believe that we've got to consider reincarnation and karma as a part of what we're looking at. And if you think about reincarnation and karma, that doesn't sit very well with the idea of singularity. So these are all just, no one has to buy into any of this, and neither do I. So, but these are just, in a way, it's like we have to use our common sense. Like, common sense is such an important capacity when it comes to inner development and spiritual worldview and navigating, because there's a lot of different spiritual ideas in the marketplace of spiritual ideas and paths, right? But common sense is what will guide us through to find the right path for us. So how does that land with you?
Well, I mean, so anything I say is speculation. I'm just throwing things at the wall. So I could, sure my cat doesn't step on my mouse. All right, you can go on your walkabout. Just stay right there. There she goes. Now she's on the computer. So let me answer this back to you.
Yeah.
To define. Okay, so let's do a Buddhist cone here. What is singularity and what are beings? What are these things that we're talking about here? What is a unitary singularity of consciousness? I'll use the C word. I try not to use it too often, but what is a phenomenal conscious, a first person subjective phenomenal state, whether it is 8 billion or whether it is 1? Where do we define? So I mentioned a Markov blanket earlier, which is just a system that is ensconced in we could say a circle or a bubble or something like that, like a cell. But where so I'll use cells as a metaphor. When we have the cells of the body, when do we get agency? When do we get individuality? Is it 10 liver cells? Is it 6 brain cells? Is it some cells in my foot muscles? When do we aggregate to a singularity? And I ask that because I can invert that again and say, when do 8 billion beings, plus the beings that are in the meta space that we don't know about, at the abstract space, beyond physicality, are they individual? Are they beings? Or are we paradoxically at once singular? So here, I'll use a metaphor. Are you distinct from the universe right now, as Louisa sitting in your house? You are hydrogen, you are carbon, you are sulfur, you are nitrogen. You appear to be a human, but if we took a view from nowhere, the moon's eye perspective of you as a person, or as me as a person, are we persons? Are we, what defines us as persons? We could take the anthropocentric perspective of what personage is. It's, we're living creatures. We have agency, we have thoughts and feelings, and you and I are having a conversation. But I'm really trying to get absurd here and say, where do things start and stop? So I'll pass that back to you as a way of trying to maybe thresh out what singularity is and what what beingness is, as you said, beings. What is beingness? And are they distinct and separate? Or is it, like Maya, is it illusory? Are we spiritual beings having a physical, are we, being physical as spiritual? So again, we could get lost in semantics, but I do in good faith, I want to maybe see what your thoughts are on that, because I don't have any answers, and everything is speculation for me. I don't have an answer for any of it myself. It's just, it's fun to talk about it.
Yeah,
yeah,
it is fun to talk about. I completely agree, and I don't I don't have answers, but I will give a counter picture, maybe.
Sure.
And that is that never I believe, in the evolution of consciousness, have we been to this place, to the depths of materialism. This is a new experience for humanity.
Yep.
And we have never been so ignorant as we are now. In a way, it's like we've never been so primitive. Which is a very strange, I'm 51. I'm allowed to make some pronouncements. I'm old and grizzled enough.
Yeah, I'm 53, so we're on the same raft in the ocean together.
Yeah, and as I read a lot. I've been reading Steiner since I was like 20, and immersed in his cosmology, and also that of his, many of his students who have built upon his work. So that's really my sort of fundamental frame of reference for thinking about all of this.
Okay.
I'm doing a very good job of sidestepping your question because I actually don't want to answer it directly. I just want to counter with a bit of a different picture. So imagine that the evolution of consciousness, there was a time when the answer to your question was self-evident. It wasn't really, it wasn't a question that people would ask because they were a part, as Steiner put it, when we were incarnated in our bodies on earth, we were asleep.
Yeah.
When we were asleep, we were awake. So there was this reversal. So there's been this, eons of development. Our physical bodies were built, and then our the chi, or the energy, or as Steiner called it, the etheric, which is really where the life is. As soon as the etheric leaves, the body immediately starts to fall apart and goes back into carbon and blah, blah, blah. And then over eons of time, gradually our capacity to think and feel and will evolved, right? And gradually over, eons, we have taken up the reins step by step. And what was held in the lap of the gods about every aspect of our existence has gradually been given over to us. I mean, there's still a lot about our physical bodies that we do not run. We do not have any conscious awareness of. like our heartbeat and our blood pumping and our digestive system. And if we do feel it, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So there's still a lot about our lives and nature that is still held and carried by something. And I would like to, propose that we are still very much supported, held in the lap of the gods who run these things for us so that we can have the experiences that we have. And so here we are, we're gradually taking on the reins. And when it comes to consciousness, it's like if you have spent any time in Europe and you've stood in one of the incredible cathedrals like Chartres or the Bourges Cathedral in the south of France. We were there last summer and it completely blew my mind. Mm-hmm. And I was standing in these cathedrals, and what I recently realized is that the masters who designed and built these cathedrals knew something about healing. And they left these cathedrals. They were built to last 1,000 years. They were built to enable humanity because they could see into the future, and because they were initiates and they were mystics, and they could see that we were going to lose more and more and more our connection to the divine, or our connection to our we would be set free more and more. And there would come a time when we would forget everything. We would have no memory, no ancestral memory, no any other kind of memory of who we really are and what we really are. But that this is a necessary part of in the long arc of evolution. So here we are in our current time, in the depths of materialism, where we basically, the prevailing worldview is that we're biomechanical machines. Mm-hmm. And we're run by processes in our brain, and our mental health is dictated by hormones and chemistry. And we have no say. But that's not how I see it. Mm-hmm. I see it like we need to ask these questions about singularity. We need to puzzle over where's the truth, and what about ethics, and what about morality and love? Do we need to include ethics in how we grow our food? Do we need to have ethics in how we run our massive corporations? Should we care that there's all this pollution happening and there's poisoning and everywhere? What does this all mean? Like, this is what freedom is, right? We have to wrestle with it all. Mm-hmm. And just to really put a brutal name to it, we have to wrestle with the nature of evil. Mm-hmm. In order to really understand what truth is, what love is, and also what our higher self is. Mm-hmm. So I don't have an answer to your question. All I really have is this is a part of how we not figure it out, because it's not about the answers, but it might be about the questions, asking better questions, building and deepening into pictures, but also knowing where we are in our process. That's why I brought in this sort of meta-evolutionary process.
Yeah.
So how did that land with you? What came up for you?
So let me do a little synthesis project here. During the axial age, there was a kind of a convergence point where, or a dispersal point, I think, where prior to this point, that individuality was essentially unheard of. I'm speaking in Western terms, not in the East, but in Greece and Rome and things like places of import, as we can read their history. And during that transition, we became individuals. I think Mark Vernon speaks this. I interviewed somebody who talked about this, and I like that idea that and this can be thought of in the fall of man, in the myth of Eden and the serpent and things like that. And that is when we fell into metacognition, we fell into self-awareness. Other people can interpret it, Adam and Eve differently, but I like that interpretation.
Yes.
Yeah, we fell into metacognition. We fell into the awareness. That's the nakedness in the garden. And so,
Right.
that's when we could also point to a sense of individuality. It's like, oh, I am not, as I use the metaphor of the cells in the system, that, I am distinct and unique. And so that onboards a lot of baggage. That onboards trauma. That onboards a lot of things. And I love that you brought up the materialism, because during the Enlightenment project, there was a schism, and it's been talked about a lot, that, religion was divorced from reason, allegedly, right? And reason was
Right.
was bullshit, excuse my
Right.
language, but it was just bullshit. But in that bullshit was nested great ideas. It brought us science, it brought us technology, but there's this hubris that I think you're pointing to in the age of reason, in the strong empiricism. And no, don't walk on my keyboard. Go over there. Sit. Be good. Telling a cat to sit. Why don't? No, sorry. She's the trickster. If we're talking about Jung here, she's trying to derail my thought. So we're nested in this age of so-called reason and empiricism and things like that. And I think I absolutely agree with you that we've lost our way, and to rediscover ensoulment, to rediscover the vitality of the spirit, that strong empiricism and rational thinking allegedly is trying to divorce humanity from, is a wrong path. It's a wrong way to go. So I'll acknowledge that. And then I'll bring back cellularity. So one metaphor that I like to work with, because I don't ever work with anything literal. Everything I work with is symbolism and metaphor, and it helps me to stay grounded in not becoming too dogmatically wed to any particular idea, but to be more in a spectrum or a flow state with whatever might be possible. And the possibilities, will maybe stand out to me as being a little more relevant. I don't know. So what I think about in cellular systems is I think of the species as a whole, 8 billion of us, 300 years ago, there was only 1 billion of us. But, whatever our numbers are, that we are a cellular system, and that we are, as you said, we are beings, we are individuals. And for me, transcendence, and now I'm really going out on a speculative ledge here. So work with me, hold my hand, grant me charity. But that I think enlightenment or healing or any of this is done concomitantly at a singular Justin or you or Rachel or anyone else, and at the scale of 8 billion people or 1 billion people, whatever the current population of humans are, and all the other sentient creatures that are just living and experiencing. That I think is the direction that whatever that which is ineffable rather, is moving, fumbling. Because when Schopenhauer talked about the will, he said the will was blind. The will had no telos. It had no goal directedness, in a sense, that we were the spearhead of that because of the fall, because we became self-reflective, because we became metacognitive, because we have the ability to regret and to remember fondly. That we are that aspect of whatever you want to call it, the Godhead, the source, the gods, that we are acting on that sort of part of that outplay, or whatever you want to call it, of things unfolding. Whitehead touched on this. Alfred North Whitehead touches the saying that comes to mind in this, that could help maybe make this a little more coherent, is that the many become one and are increased by one. So what he's talking about is an organism rather than individuality. It is an organism that is, and God is the lure that draws the organism forward in creativity. And you talk about truth, beauty, and goodness, which is Platonic. You mentioned the Logos. So I love Neoplatonism, and that to me fits very well with this, that the truth, the beauty, and the goodness are these forms, these archetypes, to get back to Jung, of our templates to get us out of sin, to get us out of ignorance, to get us out of evil, right? Out of the deprivation of our own shadow projection and our own egoic pursuit to sort of, I'm getting really broad, I'm all over the place now, but I'm trying to bring up to a synthesis project with you to say that our way out perhaps is at once paradoxically as a singularity, which is Justin or Louisa, and the cellular body of humanity, which is 8 billion people, to arrive at a place of healing, as you work with and you talk about. And so I'll stop there again as an attempt at just sort of meeting you in a plateau somewhere where we can fit everything we've talked about together, so that you also understand
Yes.
that when I speak very paradoxically about singularity and multiplicity
That's
and
good.
all these things. Yeah, it has to
That's
be a
really good.
paradox.
Yes.
I think language breaks down when we start to really try to talk about the mystery, and the absurdity of
It
what
really does. It
simple
really
little
does.
monkeys like ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also because English, I can't really speak for other languages, but English is not set up to talk about these spiritual concepts.
Yeah.
It's just not really equipped to do so. So we fumble and we struggle and we do our best.
Yeah.
But
Amen.
I think you did a good job, and I followed you. And I think what we're talking about is praxis.
Yeah.
So here we are, these little singularities, and we think we're so insignificant when you talk about 8 billion people. But this is the beauty and the mystery of the situation, because yes, you, Justin, are a praxis. And it's only through you that transformation can come about if you so choose. And the same is true for me and for my daughter over there. And for somebody who, my friend over in Uganda, right? For her too, she's in the same boat. And it's amazing how if we, as in us as singularities, choose to take a healing path, and we begin to reap the benefits of that, so do the people around us.
Yeah.
You've heard of Rupert Sheldrake.
Oh yeah.
And
Morphic resonance. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, what a beautiful and thoroughly researched idea. And it's greatly assisting. It's going to greatly assist us, because you can begin to create morphic fields of possibility. Just one person, even in 8 billion, can create morphic fields of possibility through this process of healing. But it can go the other way too, I think.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to allow certain things to be a mystery, not because we shouldn't approach the mystery, or because we shouldn't think about it, but that we have to accept that they are a mystery. That how is it that us as singular individuals, who are just little, drops in the ocean of 8 billion people, how can we have any significance whatsoever? But I think this is a part of what we don't yet know how to see, or we can't yet understand, because we don't have the capacity, at a collective capacity. This has yet to be built. But we have built this mighty intellect that didn't exist, in Plato's time. He was a forerunner. He was, and Aristotle and those mighty thinkers, they forged the morphic capacity, the morphic field of capacity, and the rest of humanity, and history, whether it's written down or not, is littered with these mighty human beings and Leonardo da Vinci, who brought new capacities to bear in humanity. And Buddha is such a picture of that. It's like he brought the capacity to love to humanity. And if it hadn't been for Buddha, then Christ's work wouldn't have been able to flourish the way that it did. So Buddha and Christ worked intimately together, from what Steiner talks about. But not just Steiner. There are other mystics who also talk about the role of Buddha in Christ's work on the earth. I mean, this is, not something that a lot of people know about.
Well, the Kashmiri Christ, the Yogananda talks about Kashmiri Christ. It's deeply controversial, but I like that narrative more than I like him hanging and dying for our sins. It's like, he went through the tribulations, and then he took back off, because they said between 14 and 29, where was Jesus? And a lot of people say, well, he went east. And that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of people went east and came back, and there was a trade route there. There was a spice route, and there was a Silk Road, and all these things. And so for me, the romantic in me was like, oh, that would be wonderful if he went and learned the ways of the rishis and the Kashmiri mystics and sages, and then came back tried to deliver that message, got some people on board, and then was, persecuted for it. And according to that legend, that he went back east and lived to be he was a guru and a sage. Yeah, I mean, it's deeply controversial, but it's fun to think about. Like you were just saying, this synergy between the Buddha and the Christ. That there was 350 years between the two of them, almost 500, a little bit around 500.
More like 800 or 900, I thought.
I thought it was 500 something BCE was Buddha, but anyway, a few
Somebody
hundred years.
Can fact check us on that.
Yeah, but and for me, I like that too, because I like to go back and forth between East and West. Like the Pyrrhonian skepticism is something I absolutely adore, and he learned Pyrovelis, who was a Greek, learned that when he went over to the Hindu Kush and Kashmir, and with the Gymnosophists, and they exchanged ideas, and he brought those back to Greece, and like you said, Plato and Aristotle. All those guys, I believe, were influenced by some of these Eastern ideas, and that seeped its way into our Western thinking. And so it's it's complexity. There's all these threads that go out, and so I love it. Yeah. That's where I go, but so I'll stop. I want you, let's get more from you. I can keep going. I don't want to step on my guest.
This is all a part of the weaving and the dialogue about these things, because I mean, I think the picture is how enormously complex and rich these things are. And but if we bring it back to healing, one of the big messages that Rachel and I really want to carry forward and broadcast is your healing is the world's healing, is your healing is the world's healing. It is positive feedback loop, and your personal development is not hermetically sealed from the world. Your experiences are not hermetically sealed at all, even though we think that they are. Like, we try and create these separations between our professional life and our personal life, and we try to protect, and we suppress, and we have all these forbidden needs, and there's all these ways that we try and compartmentalize in order to cope, right? But I think we need to realize just how much of our inner life is actually shaping our outer life. And the more we can start to see how directly it correlates, the more, and this is a converse thing, the more we begin to have agency to create the life we want. And this is not about manifesting. This is not about any sort of gray magic or stuff. This is really just about getting in flow with what you're here to do, because there's no time to waste. The world is going to hell in a handbasket. So your healing is a part of that. Right. Yeah. So what comes up in you when I say all that?
Well, I want to come back to what you said about materialism, because of it created a meaning vacuum, and nihilism was born of that meaning vacuum. So we have this vapid consumerism, we have drug abuse, sex abuse, shop abuse, eat abuse, all these things come up, all these addictive patterns come up to try to say to ourselves and to fill whatever this weird void is that we can't, maybe a lot of people couldn't put their finger on, but it's a meaning void, it's a purpose void, it's a sense void, all these things. And so absolutely, it is reciprocal, that if I get my shit together and I'm better off and I'm radiating this kind of truth, beauty, and goodness and positive affect, and that I don't get triggered as easily or project my shadow as easily, that I am contributing to the organism that is our human family being healthier and more coherent. And so again, if we can lens it that way, if we can hold that beautiful paradoxical tension between individual and collective, that we can see the dance or the relationality to that it gives me greater sense of urgency and importance to making sure I'm as healed as I am, put together as I am, and that I can be an ambassador to this kind of thinking, that I want to be there for others, and I want to have positive affect on others, and that I can in fact, be infectious in that regard, rather than being an asshole and being, and being cranky and stuff like that. Now, one thing I'll put to you as an idea is, you mentioned reincarnation and karma, and I want to touch on that you talk about Sheldrake's morphic resonance and the masters who came before us. To me, that's karma and reincarnation. It's just not like, so if I die, when I die, I don't want to be me after I die. I want to be the experience that I had in perpetuity. You know, they talk about Akashic records and things like that. That's a great picture we can draw up, that when Justin existed, he had experience, and that experience is part of the karma, and that it is part of, you know, when, whatever you want to call it, onboards another human life, that its life can be, the trajectory can be moved about by that. So if a person comes in with a virtuosity of musical talent or talent at running a business, that it isn't that they were John Smith or Mary Jones in another lifetime, that it is at once the paradoxical unitariness and the beingness, the multiplicity of beingness, that is just coming into a new life form. That essentially a baby might be a tabula rasa, and it might be coming in with very little, but that it, through the help of introjection, through learning from others, that it quickly remembers and it quickly knows where it's at, and that it can fulfill that, whatever it is, the lure, the draw, the desire. So that I would offer that as a very gentle handling of karma and reincarnation, that it isn't about like, I'm going to come back in 30 years as a new person with amnesia, but nonetheless this sort of built-in soul plan, that can be done without me being involved. Like, I really hope that I don't exist after I die. I just want my memories to be retained. I don't want to be me after God, can you imagine? I can't imagine being me for all eternity. And I'm being absurd, because I'm sure during the transmortification or whatever, that I won't be, my ego dies, I'm gone, toast, all that kind of stuff. But that all the pain and the joy and the tedium that I experienced in this lifetime is reserved, it's retained, and that whatever the mystery is going to adjust for it. So it's Bayesian calculus. Like, it brings that information on board and says, what's next? What's the next experience? Yeah. So that's just my way of kind of gently. So this might be good for skeptics. Yeah, I don't know, but it might be just like the gentle way to approach what is, I think, a very natural process. So I agree with karma and reincarnation, but not necessarily that I'm going to come back to this world as a school to learn for me. It's more that the Godhead, whatever you want to call it, is learning through all of us, and that it doesn't require my agency to return. It just requires that an agency returns and experiences a lesson. Now, that doesn't do good for the justice sense of karma. Like, if I killed somebody in this lifetime, that I have to come back and get killed so I know what it's like. I mean, that could almost create a combinatorial explosion where, you know, so for me, I can't justify that as much, but I can justify the beauty and the simplicity of the will or the Godhead saying, okay, well, this was Louisa's life, and Louisa did all these things, and now I'm curious, and I, you know, or whatever my capacity for metacognition as a big whatever it is, to come in and be curious. You know, so anyway, and again, Whitehead tried to handle that. Whitehead said that God suffers with us, that God is in this, is moving along on this process of creation, and he had eternal objects like the forms that Plato spoke about. So he had eternal objects that came down and expressed themselves through human creativity, through the spontaneity of being Louisa or Justin, and that, you know, they became a perished object, that there was satisfaction in, like what you did today or what I did today, that becomes a perished object of the past, and that there was satisfaction in that. But the lure, the eros that what he called God, was drawing Louisa and Justin into the next day, the next chapter of experience, and that there was this concrescence of the eternal objects and a few other things in this sort of creole of phenomenology that brought. And it's, you know, Whitehead is Whitehead. You take it with a grain of salt, but to me, it's poetic, and it's the mind of a mathematician. Very poetic.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't take any of it literally, but I think it's a dance of creativity and a dance of aesthetics and art and beauty, which takes us back to the work that you and Rachel are doing, which is why I gravitated to you guys, because to come into a full circle with you, that, you know, if we lens our healing process through aesthetics, arts, creativity, and the discipline that is required to dance a beautiful dance of life and a dance of healing, or to compose a beautiful song of healing, or to draw a beautiful canvas of creativity and co-creation with whatever, that that I think is truth, good, and beauty. You know, the truth, the goodness, and the beauty.
Yeah, and imagine if your life is the creative medium. You know, what are you gonna do? Well, first of all, you got to really get to know your creative medium.
Yeah.
And when it comes to healing, to my points earlier, get to know the nature of this medium so that you can be a bit more masterful with it, right? And this is also another argument for the case of what we're doing and setting up the conditions for in what we're doing, which is connected to your higher self, which is, it's kind of like, I mean, the way that you're languaging it through Whitehead and through Schopenhauer and these other dudes who have their own vernacular trying to express, and often using symbolic language to do so.
Yeah.
I think for me, of course, I'm going to throw in my own.
Yeah, of course.
Which is that our higher self is that continues from life to life. And, that unbroken part of it. I mean, it's very helpful to know there's a part of you that's not broken. Like, that can be very just nice to know that there is hope. There's always hope, no matter how dark things get, right? But that this higher self, using the muscle of the eye, which is your witness, to get to know the nature of this medium through cognition, then you can play. Then you can be an artist. Then you can do this wonderful dance between the soft will and the hard will. Like you like John Cage said, never create and analyze at the same time. They are two distinct processes. So you do, and it takes a lot of hard will to get shit done in the world, like it does. But then you have to stop, and you have to stand back, and you have to look, and you have to receive. And this is something my husband does in front of the canvas all the time. He paints the color. He stands back, he sits in a chair, he's looking at it, and he's looking, and he's looking, and he's like, what is needed next? He doesn't know. He has no plan. This is not how painting works. That you, if you ever get to see Picasso paint, he will paint it and it looks like it's finished, and then he will brutally erase half of it and then paint it again, and it's much better, you know. So there's this dance between receiving. What are you receiving? Is it singularity? Is it the will of singularity? Is it an undirected will? Is it a directed will? Is it your will? Is it God's will? Like, what's going on, right? But you have to get to know that. You have to actually set up the conditions in which you can experience that for yourself, and you decide, not out of an abstraction, but out of a lived experience of what is that. And chances are it's a part of you that is very, very, very wise, because it's seen many lives. It's been on the planet a lot. Is not a part of you that you are yet able to connect to, because you simply don't have the capacities. At this time on this planet, humanity doesn't have the capacities. I'm sure there are individuals that do, because they're like further ahead than the rest of us or whatever. Maybe they can see into the Akashic record. I don't know about you, but I can't. I'm not there yet. I'm not so, you know. But my hypothesis is that we can already connect to a part of us that is very wise, and that can be a source of direction and inspiration, and that has a spiritual reality. But what the nature of that spiritual reality is, well, we have to listen to the mystics, and we have to read the writings of our ancient spiritual teachers and masters to try and put together a picture of something. That's been my path. Is I read Judith von Haller and Kuhlevent and Steiner and Barfield and Valentin Tomberg and all these people you probably never heard of,
Mhm.
And some of those incredible Russians. What's his name? Andreev, who wrote The Rose of the World about this Sophia, the divine Sophia.
Mhm.
I mean, we haven't even touched on, you know, the feminine mysteries, you know, Chartres and so many of these cathedrals. People don't realize they were built based upon the Sophianic mysteries.
Mhm.
You know.
Mhm.
Anyway, so maybe I better pause there and see what's coming up for you.
Well, I'm glad you invoked the divine feminine, because I think that has been a tangent of mine lately. So I recently discovered Sri Anandamamai, and she was they said she was Kali incarnate. And she, to me, is the same energy as Mary, the Mother of God, kind of that energy. And one of the female archetypes that I thoroughly enjoy had a saying. Her name was Marguerite Porete. She was burned at the stake in the 14th century for having the audacity to challenge the fathers of the church and say that God was love instead of some, you know, patriarchal authoritarian who had bad days, you know, and things like that. And so she had a saying that I really love to keep around because it speaks to non-duality. And it says, let God annihilate you and consume your soul. And when she was admitted to the monastery, it was a Celtic monastery in the 1340s or 50s or whatever. And so that ties into Neoplatonism, which ties back again, probably into Advaita Vedanta at some point. There's again, this Indra's net of ideas that we can't escape from, which leads me, excuse me, to a point. When we talk about the higher self, and I'm not trying to be a dog with a bone here, but would you be terribly disappointed if the higher self was at once paradoxically you and all? I mean, so I would ask then, like, we are, I agree with you. We have a higher self. I think we do, and we have the potential. I think it's a renunciant, negative process to achieve communion with the higher self. So I say negative in the sense that it's like apophasis. It is to know the divine mystery by how you cannot define the divine mystery. You just have to sit with.
Yeah.
So cataphasis is like the fathers of the church, who's like, well, God's an old man and he hates, sodomites, and, we're just gonna have to deal with it. He has bad, he's grumpy and he's bipolar and all these things, but apophasis is to say, I am in communion with the mystery and I have no effing idea what I'm dealing with here.
Right.
And so like I said, it's a surrender process. It's a renunciant, it's like Islam. Islam is a devotional practice, and you prostrate down to the divine, and and there are a lot of devotional practices, the Sufi mystics and some of the Hindu saints and what's the other Sikhism has a bit of a devotional practice into it. And so they're tapping into something where you're clearing away the ego, you're clearing away the sense of identity to get not necessarily to a pure non-dual Buddha state where you become no self, but it is more that you can understand the liminal space where there's Louisa and Justin, and yet there is the ocean of emptiness that Buddha talks about. But the ocean of emptiness is pure potentiality. It is the truth, the beauty, and the goodness, non-incarnate, non-actualized, and non-realized. And so that's where I'm teasing you a little bit and saying, what if the higher self were just in that continuum so that it maybe just stretches its way from Justinness into this smaller cone of being
singularity.
Being you, being everything. And so again, I just throw that out. I'm just kind of prodding you a little bit, but I agree with you that there is a higher self, but I wonder where the higher self dissipates into the ocean.
Where does it end, and where does something?
Right.
It's tricky because I think a part of where we're at in our time is this individuation, and it's like everything that has held us together in any kind of group sense has been pretty much utterly destroyed. Socially, physiologically, ideologically, we have individuated to a very high degree now, and it's expressed in some very strong antisocial tendencies that we can observe in our societies everywhere. So this makes this question very pertinent. Like, what does this mean if we are a higher self and there's a spiritual reality, and we know, because we intuit, we don't know, but we intuit that there's some kind of not singularity, maybe, or maybe that's the right word, I'm not sure, because whenever you mention the word singularity, I keep thinking of AI.
Oh,
and,
no,
and everyone's afraid of singularity. So that's what I'm like, oh no, this is not a, but
no, this is more of a Buddhist ocean of
consciousness.
Right. And it's paradoxical because it is the void, it is nothingness, but that doesn't mean that it isn't pregnant with everything. So here, somebody explained this to me recently. It was a philosopher I follow, and he said, think about nothingness. It is everything. Everything is nothingness, and nothingness is everything. And you really have to chew on that for a minute. But then you realize that if we talk about infinite everything, that it is truly nothingness, because it is, you cannot extract yourself away from that. You cannot be outside of it. You cannot be individuated from it. So
the danger is if we get too abstract, because abstraction and then abstracting from the abstraction, I think it's an intellectual exercise, but it's ultimately not necessarily giving us any information with which it's not giving us necessarily information that we can then use to inform our experience. Because in my work, it's a combination of working with a concept, and it has to be practical. It has to be something that you can actually use. So it can't be too abstracted. It might feel abstract at first because you've never wielded it before, right? But you've got to be able to wield it and then test and bring it into experience. Because if we have experience without cognition, we can never know what we're experiencing, obviously, right? So when it comes to the higher self, yes, there's abstraction there, because we're struggling with English. We're struggling with a language that cannot really articulate these completely abstract concepts, and language of the spirit is not what the English language is good at. I'm not sure that there's any human language that is really suited to this.
It breaks down. It all breaks down. Intelligibility.
It breaks down. You hit a threshold, and that threshold is between our material existence and a spiritual reality, and there's that threshold, and our language can't make it. So you and I are wrestling with this, but maybe one thing we can at least say is that we can experience phenomena in a fractal way. So you can see, the reason why there are a lot of analogs out in nature that help inform us about the nature of the soul. What does healthy movement of the soul? We use this a lot inside our school, our Magenta. We can use analogs in nature to help us understand the phenomena of the soul and healing processes, because we have a lot in relationship to nature. And we can also see that there are constantly harmonics happening in relation to everything. So let's say we can say, we have a soul, but there's a differentiation in the soul. You can talk about different differentiation, so part of your soul is more connected to your physical body. Part of your soul is more connected to this realm of, of the shadow. Part of your soul is more connected to the higher self. So there's this differentiation. You could call it intellectual soul, consciousness soul, sentient soul. There's all these different ways that we can form some anatomical structure. And I think we can do the same potentially for the higher self, that because we can see the phenomena of differentiation happening in everywhere we look in particular ways, we can then infer, because of this universal nature of the fractal, we can carry this concept or this idea of a differentiation and an anatomical structure in the eye. So just to build on what you're saying, we've got this part of our eye that is like the witness, which is maybe the part that our soul is able to connect with and interact with, and gradually build. Like if you've ever had the experience of sitting with something, a question, and then you sleep on it and you sit with it some more and you sleep on it, and then you're sitting with a friend and they say something and it was like, oh my God, that's it. That's the answer to this thing I've been sitting with.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it came out of the periphery and was given to you.
Mm-hmm.
Or it landed, when you took a moment to breathe and just sit, that's when or you went to the shower because you actually stopped thinking about it and then it dropped in. So these experiences of illumination, I think, we could say is where the higher self touches into our day awake consciousness. The supraconscious is able to drop into the day awake consciousness. And then what's above that? Well, maybe this is what you're talking to. There's something else that's above that. And then there's something else that's above that. And through, into the future, we're gradually going to conquer. We're going to absorb. We're going to become capacitated to be able to be in tune and inspirative tune with, our higher self at the lowest level. In 1,000 years, we'll just be there. And then the next 1,000 years, it'll be the next layer up. Like if you look in the past, you can see that there's this process that can give us pictures for how things are going to play out in the future if this concept of fractal, right, is true. How does that land with you?
I think we can have our cake and eat it too. I'll use an example of physics as being a useful fiction to describe phenomenal states, and physics and perhaps even maths are a construct of our intellect, and it is the best way we have possible to define what we term the physical world, so that we use quantitative modeling, measuring, predicting. We can pretty accurately see the patterns and regularities of what we call physical reality. And so a lot of it is a priori knowledge. It is knowledge absent of practical experience. So you sitting in the chair and having an experience is a posteriori experience. And so it is a lived experience. But I think we can have this a priori experience of what is down to the quanta of physics, and then everything breaks apart, becomes fuzzy in fields of potential, right? So I mean, we can't even firmly grasp what physics is. So I'll invert that when we talk about the higher self, that I think you're tapping into something very meaningful here when you talk about a fractal nature, which I suspect is infinite. I suspect it is way beyond our ability to calculate. Right. Again, trying to use our best means of intellectualizing it. Right. But that the higher self, yes, it goes back to that cognitive light cone, or like in the Vedic system where they talk about chakras, and I don't consider them energy systems. I consider them being, mind systems or whatever, and that can go on to wherever. And so at some point, I think spatiotemporal bounds, and Donald Hoffman talks about this, that space-time is dead. I mean, we just have to use that as a useful fiction to get around. We have to have watches. We have to know that if I walk into that wall back there, it's going to hurt. We have to have these language to describe the limitations of physicality. I can't disappear right now. I can't turn into a giraffe. So, and that brings up free will. Like I can't completely be free-willed. I can't turn into a bird or anything like that. Right. But I'm digressing. So I would say, yes, I completely agree with you that I think it's fractal, it's iterative, it's phasal, all at once. And so I think that, when we reference the higher self, again, I think we can have our cake and eat it too, that there is this ability to access something far beyond where we are now. And if we go back 200 or 350 or 400,000 years, when our cortical capacity came online, when we have these forebrains, the wrinkly forebrains that give us this ability, again, the fall of man, to be metacognitive and self-reflective, that was a huge leap from just being very primitive, instinctual creatures. I would say primitive, that we just acted more on impulse, like I hate to say lower animals, but like alligators and things like that just have, eat, reproduce, eat, reproduce, that's basically their agenda. And so for us to be this complex and dynamic in what we're calling the 21st century, I fully agree with you. I think if we can heal our shadows, do the work that you guys are doing, and clear the space for growth and potential, I don't see it as being some sort of Darwinian next fold of the forebrain, but it could be anything that we're just really not aware of right now. Like, again, my cognitive light cone biologist was talking about amorphous space, about cellular swarm intelligence, and that we have means of now being these metacognitive creatures that we can allow ourselves to become even more wired or dialed in to our cognitive nature, our minded nature, and that may reveal to us things that I won't even dare to speculate. So I'm with you 100%. Right. So, but again, I think as you intuited a moment ago, that where is the breakoff point? It doesn't matter. For where we are, it doesn't matter. So we don't need to go beyond the higher self, I don't think, in order to do the work, especially that you all are doing. I think it's absolutely essential. I think, again, it's just a priori knowledge. It's knowledge absent of experience. We can't, not yet, necessarily tap into that higher self direct. It's asymmetrical. The higher self can supervene on us. It can reveal to us, but we cannot dictate to the higher self anything, so I that's where I think I would be 100% with you, is to say that it is a supervening or a downward causation process, and that, like you said, there may be certain individuals who have sat in either mindful or contemplative states, and maybe they've gotten a little more access to what I would call higher intuitive nature or a higher self, whatever it is, and those are the people that we talk about, the mystics and the saints and the people. Ibn Arabi is a guy that I love. He's a Sufi mystic, and he was just like my Marguerite Poiret or Sri Anandama Mai. I think she just was tapped in. I think she was tapped in not only to her higher self, but perhaps to the Godhead itself. I don't know. This is all speculation. But so to summarize, I don't disagree with you at all. I'm the curious sort that wants to, think about the relationship and think about it. And so probably the best thing I could say is that it's somewhat asymmetrical as of now, that we cannot consciously, willfully access the higher mind, given where we are, whether that's having all the baggage of the shadow, or that's that we're just primitive, we're just coming out of one teenage phase of adaptation or evolution or whatever you want to call it. And that we're moving into that. I agree with you. I think we're moving forward, but it's a hell of a journey. It's the
sure is
the Fermi's it's the Fermi's paradox. It's like Fermi said, well, why don't we have super intelligent creatures visiting us? It's because, well, they blew themselves up with energy weapons. We living creatures, intelligent creatures get just smart enough to be dangerous, and they destroy themselves. And that's where we are right now. We have fingers on buttons that can just kill life on Earth 30,000 times over. And it was nice, thanks for all the fish and goodbye and all that kind of thing. So anyway, but it's so fun to talk about.
It is.
It really is, because I think it's this kind of pursuit, this kind of curiosity that opens doors. So maybe there's, if we still have folks watching, God bless you, that might shift some kind of trajectory, and they're thinking, and they were working on some really genius idea, and you and I might kick some idea out there to them, and they're going to take that and move with it and so forth. So I think these conversations are absolutely essential. But to summarize,
I agree.
I'm on board with you 100%. I try to take the most parsimonious way to arrive at something, and it's not a reductive parsimony. It is more just how can we apprehend it most gently, and how can we apprehend it reverently, because we are talking about a divine process here. And so that's where I kid glove it. I try to handle it.
Nicely done. We do not want to reduce it. We've got enough of that going on in materialism. Thank you very much.
We've tasted that medicine, and it's no good.
And it's not good.
Right. I mean, it's the Moloch deal. I mean, it's like we've gotten, you and I are talking into little plastic boxes through copper wires across satellites and the cloud and all this stuff. So yes, hats off to technology. And you said the singularity in AI, and oh my God, what, what's
Yeah.
that going to bring? But
Yeah.
again, this is a learning. We're fumbling towards, as Sarah McLachlan said, we're fumbling towards ecstasy. Yeah, I think that was an album of her in the 90s.
Right.
We're fumbling
Right.
towards an awakening and enlightenment. But I think it'll be a collective. Like we will arrive together as individuals who light up, as well as the system. Hopefully, if we get through the bottleneck of our adolescence
Right.
as sentient creatures, that we have the potential. Rocks are still going to fall on people, trees are still going to crash on houses, things like that. But I think there is so much potential for where we can be, and I think that's what you and Rachel are working on. And we need that, and we need diversity. Like I said in the beginning, you're a facet on a diamond, and I think what you guys are doing is critical. And bringing in those esoteric thinkers, all the people that you mentioned. And I got my little stable. I have a vision board over here. My wife said, build a vision board. And she's like, here's some magazines you can cut out your phrases. But I took all of my sages and mystics. I don't know if it'll show up, but I have a thing over there. Let me see if I can get it to stabilize it. But I got Christ and Mary, and then I got Sri Aurobindo and a bunch of other people. So they're my little superheroes,
That's so
that
cool.
Yeah. So it's a team effort. It's a team. Well,
it is a team effort. That's right. And there are some incredible people, some wonderful human beings who are forerunners. And who are, who've suffered much and sacrificed a great deal, if not everything, to serve. And those people are certainly inspire me, but they're also the great teachers. And we're not in this alone, and we need to, it takes a village. So so we need to tap into their work, because the kinds of dialogue that you and I are having, I just have one point to make about this. The kind of dialogue you and I are having, to some might seem abstract or unnecessary or impractical, but I would say it's extremely practical, because we have to work with the fact that there's so little meaning for people in the world. And what you and I are trying to do is bring ideas and hints and possibilities of these mighty, mighty pictures that are symbols, that are our, maybe even clumsy articulations of possibility, that provide us with pictures that we are more than just biomechanical machines. We are more than just material things, that there is a meaning and purpose behind why we are here in this time, even though things are really hard and really brutal, and everything is going to hell in a handbasket, and our politicians are about as corrupt. I mean, had no idea how corrupt things really are all over the world, and our democracies are coming to an end, and what are we going to do? And, so, but knowing that there's an invisible world of support that actually stands behind us. There's an ever-present help that is there to provide support if we want it, if we ask for it. And the asking is what meditation is. You make space in your heart and your mind for that soft will, receptive, I'm emptying out, I'm asking for healing, I'm laying my confession of my wounds and my struggles and my mistakes, I'm laying them on the altar, and I'm asking for help. Can provide the emptying out just enough so that you're not a full cup, so that you can receive something that helps. So our dialogue is practical, in my view, because of that. So that's kind of the last thing I wanted to say.
I think that's the best way to end what we've been working on, is to summarize it that way. I don't have anything to add except to agree with you that they do stand behind us, whether it's as mundane as picking up their books or, watching a documentary on the work of these dead sages, mystics, and philosophers who have stood behind us. But yeah, I mean, just use your intuition and your imagination and imagine. Like I said, I have my little board over here, and they're looking at me, right?
Very
and
powerful tool. Yes.
However that lands for you, the audience or any of us, that's what it's all about. because that's
Yeah.
all that matters, is that you've been inspired and that you will
Right.
act on it. Yeah. So
Yes.
I'm gonna just do nothing but agree with you on that and say,
Thank you. Yes.
yeah. I mean, like, I
This
would
is
even
really
disagree.
fun.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
what a
know,
great
I know.
conversation, man.
Oh, I know. I needed this to just have
Oh,
this
good.
conversation, because we never disagreed on anything. It was just arriving at, it was just using different language and really arriving at the same sort of space,
Right.
but with different perspectives and things like that. So I love your perspective. I love that you've impressed upon me your thinking, and that we were able to keep it in synthesis together. And my cat's back on my lap again. Are you
Well,
my
I have my
producer?
dog here as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Our little
Yeah,
friends, our little our spirits that work with us here. So,
that's
but
right. That's right.
Louisa, this was such a beautiful conversation, and like you said, it is important. It does have essence to it that can be appreciated. And whether it's us talking or any other conversation that tries to do meaning making and tries to make
Yes,
sense of things and
exactly.
open up
Exactly.
a way forward,
Yeah,
please, yeah, by all means. So
that's what we need.
and you can come back if you want to go through it again. We can do more, because you know what, you tapped into something that I don't want to, because this is probably good for a conversation, but power. And you talked about that in one of your dialogues with Rachel about power. And I want to,
Mhm.
maybe we can tap into that in another conversation, because the
Mhm.
way you two were talking about that, that needs to be out
Mm.
there. That needs,
So
so
that must have been the taking your power back.
I want to
Uh,
say, I could pull it up, but yeah,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
just tell me what interests you. You know, if you want to have another conversation about that, just tell me what it is that came up for you, like triggered you in a good way or even in a
Mm.
bad way.
Yeah,
That
no,
yeah.
it was all good. It was all good. So the trigger is the spark. It is getting my imagination gears turning. And so some of the things you threw out, I'm letting go and opening my cognitive, my ability to receive more, so that I'm not, because short of being arrogant, I try to be open and receptive to ideas and hold them in a space, and make a creole or a tapestry of ideas, and just have that all available, because it can come out. Things that you said, I can bring them out later in other conversations. And I did that tonight. I was talking about the cognitive light cone biologist, Mike Levin,
Right.
who's a really neat
Right.
guy. And yeah, so these things come up, and I can reference you and some of the things you and I've talked about. So yeah, everything was perfect in this conversation, as far as, just being able to have my reference library is expanded now.
Yeah, nice, nice, awesome.
But yeah, you're
Yeah,
invited. If this was a
thank
good experience
you.
for you, I'd love to have you back. Maybe this fall we can bring you back. And like I said,
Yeah,
there were
please.
some things, we don't have to go as deep down into the ontology of everything. I think we can go back to more practical things, like human relations and the power structure and distribution of
Yeah,
power. And I don't mean physical power, but more consensual power and normatives and societal normatives, and how we give away our power and how we take
yeah,
power and things. So that could be a whole nother show. So
yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
let's
Let's
think
do it.
about that. Yeah, absolutely. Louisa, this has been beautiful, wonderful, creative. You're an artist. I expected nothing less
Thank you.
than
Thank
a
you.
very creative
Awesome.
conversation. So I
Yeah,
am
it was really fun. Thank you so much.
good.
I don't get to talk about most of this stuff,
Yeah.
because yeah, I don't get to talk about it. So that was really fun.
Good.
Thank you.
Same here. Yeah, absolutely. I drive my wife insane sometimes. We'll go on road trips and I'll do blah, 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 and she's like, she's good
Yeah,
for the first half hour, and it's like, yeah, zip it.
right. Yeah, I bet.
So thank you
Awesome.
for the chat. I'll say goodbye
Yeah.
to you after I stop record, but to the YouTube audience, thank you all so much for
Okay.
coming along, and I hope you enjoyed our
Thanks for
conversation.
listening.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you so
exactly.
much for listening and staying this long.
That's right. I always am deeply grateful to the ones that hang out to the
Yeah.
end. So much gratitude and love to you guys. Truth, beauty, and goodness. And I'll have all of Magenta's information down below, including their YouTube channel. Subscribe. So because their dialogues are really good. All right. So again, Louisa, I'll say goodbye to you once we're done recording. And to the YouTube guys, thank you again so much.